Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the OSC Office of Operations Annual Fall Conference. As Trish said, my name is Dave Hasso, and I am the Deputy Controller for the Division of Payroll, Accounting, and Revenue Services. As many of you are aware, for the past several years, the Office of Operations has hosted this fall conference for state agencies. During this conference, representatives of the 6 operational bureaus that comprise the Office of Operations look forward to providing you with valuable information and updates regarding key aspects of their bureau functions. At the conclusion of previous fall conferences, agency attendees have had the opportunity to complete a survey and make suggestions for improvements in new courses. This year, we have attempted to include new information and additional detail in our presentation structure, as well as providing an operational overview of each of our bureaus. So again, welcome, thank you for attending, and enjoy the conference. We will begin with an overview of the Bureau of State Accounting Operations provided by Bureau Director Melody Getz. Take it away, Melody.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. As Dave mentioned, the Office of Operations is made up of 6 operational bureaus, and while each one fulfills specific responsibilities, they are all needed to carry out the operational needs of the controller. Our bureaus got together to demonstrate here today how the bureaus within the Office of Operations connect, and the important roles we all play in ensuring that payments are made appropriately and timely. Next slide, please. We are starting with the Bureau of State Accounting Operations, or BSAO. I am Melody Getz, the Director of Accounting Operations. We're a bureau of about 40 people. We are organized into 4 major units that ensure that daily operations involving accounting transactions are submitted, posted, and recorded properly so OSC can achieve its statutory responsibility, vision, mission, and goals. The Bureau is responsible for executing the state laws and annual legislation that supports the state's financial plans, and managing the state's cash availability and various banking relationships with state agencies. Almost all of the activities in accounting operations must be performed daily, and staff in each unit are in constant communication with agency personnel like yourselves regarding budgets, revenues, cash balances, and refunds. Next slide, please. Our goals in the Bureau include establishing and maintaining the budget authorizations or appropriations based on the annual budget, ensuring the state has enough cash to meet expected disbursements each day, determining excess revenues to be invested until the next payment is due, and managing banking services impacting the state's general checking account. We also account for all refunds and revenues of the state, including all taxes, miscellaneous receipts, and federal grants needed to run the state. We maintain projects for federal grants and perform daily federal draw, which electronically seeks reimbursement for state agency administered federal programs. And finally, we authorize daily payments and files for release pursuant to the controller's statutory responsibility to do so. Next slide, please. Accounting operations activities are heavily centered around the state's budget cycle, just like the entire state, really. The state's fiscal year starts on April 1 and ends on March 31st, and is basically a never-ending circle of life. The state's fiscal year starts with agencies preparing their budget presentations, including new programs, fees, and other legislative needs for the next fiscal year from June till September, October-ish. Agencies then submit their budget needs between September and December, and DOB examiners review them for inclusion in the governor's executive budget proposal. Based on revenue projections in November, the governor makes decisions and proposes the financial plan for the next year and a few years out. In January through March, the legislature takes action, and the budget is passed by April 1, which contain the budget authorizations for each agency. And then in April, we execute the new budget, and the whole cycle starts over and just keeps going on and on. So the budget authorizations that are approved by March 31st with the new budget are those appropriations are available for agencies to spend and must be established in SFS in order for agencies to be able to submit their payments. And that's where our first focus area in accounting operations comes in. Next slide, please. Our budgets and spending accounting unit is primarily focused on establishing and maintaining the appropriation control records in SFS based on the annual budget bills that are passed every year. They ensure that once payments take place, that expenditures and disbursements are properly recorded pursuant to appropriation language, as well as summarizing and reporting on certain budget authorizations as required by law. Appropriations are generally active for 1 year plus a lapse period to complete payments on incurred liabilities for that fiscal year. So the budgets and spending team also updates the lapse dates for reappropriations, which extend the authorization for existing appropriations for another year. If the appropriations are not extended, they will lapse during one of our 3 major lapsing events each year, or March if it applies. Next slide, please. Questions for our budgets and spending accounting unit can be directed to the appropriations mailbox, as you see here, or if you work directly with appropriation budgets, your agency is assigned an appropriation accountant, and you'd be able to reach somebody directly through that contact. So now that the budget authorizations are established and ready for spending in SFS, the next step in making a payment may require a contract. So I would like to introduce the Director of Contracts, Brian Fuller.
Thank you, Melody. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Fuller. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Contracts. I'm happy to be able to provide you today with some information about our Bureau. So once your appropriation is established, one way to spend against it is through a contract. I'll provide you with a brief summary of our role in the state's contracting process and also just talk to you a little bit about the makeup of our Bureau. Next slide, please. So what do? The Bureau of Contracts reviews and approves contract transactions entered into by state agencies and certain public authorities over specific dollar thresholds. Those thresholds do vary, but generally we review state agency contracts over $50,000 and have the ability to review public authority contracts over $1 million that utilize state funds or that are conducted on a non-competitive basis. We review the contract and associated procurement before the contract is finalized, which allows us to identify potential issues before taxpayer money has been spent, before projects have advanced, and before important programs and services could be negatively affected. Our independent pre-review is intended to ensure procurements conducted by state agencies are open, fair, and done in accordance with the applicable laws, rules, and regulations, and that the resulting contracts contain terms that can be monitored after the fact and that are in the best interest of New York State. Next slide, please. So the goals of our Bureau are to carry out our contract approval responsibilities by providing professional services that are timely, judicious, and responsive to our customers. We do strive not to substitute our judgment for that of our agency partners, as we know they're the experts in their respective areas and programs. We rather focus our review on the merits of the procurement and the contracts that are before us. We generally get 90 days by law to review most of the transactions that are sent to us for review, with certain exceptions, but the actual time it takes us to perform is much less than that, usually less than a week on average. Our reviews are conducted with the utmost transparency and independence, and the results of our contract reviews are communicated to our agency stakeholders immediately once we approve a contract. And also descriptive information about that contract is provided to the public in Open Book New York, usually the next day. Next slide, please. A little bit about our staff. Our staff have a wide range of expertise and are arranged in teams where they focus on certain types of transactions. Our invitation for bid team reviews contracts for commodities and services awarded on the basis of lowest cost, as well as commodity contracts awarded on a single or a sole source basis. Examples would range from equipment purchases to service contracts for something like busing, where your requirements could be articulated so specifically that all you require from the vendor is their price. Our request for proposal team reviews service contracts where the award is based on a combination of cost and technical factors, as well as service contracts awarded on a single or a sole source basis. An example would be a complex IT procurement where you'd like your bidders to propose a solution to a business need, and then you'll evaluate that through a technical evaluation and a cost evaluation to determine your ultimate winner. Our construction team reviews construction contracts and associated change orders. This would include both highway and building construction, as well as construction projects at state parks and other facilities. Our real property and negotiated team reviews negotiated contracts, including architect and engineering contracts, contracts for the purchase and sale of real property, leases, and also intergovernmental agreements. An example there would be an easement that the state needs on a piece of property for a future construction project, or maybe a lease that the state requires for a new program. Our grants team reviews contracts for human services and our infrastructure awarded to not-for-profit organizations and municipalities, as well as contracts specifically authorized by the legislature. Examples would be contracts to house the homeless or to provide after-school programs in underprivileged neighborhoods. And finally, our vendor responsibility team is responsible for the Comptroller's Vendor Responsibility Program, which enhances and standardizes state agency processes related to vendor responsibility determinations. Our Bureau reviews vendors who are contracting with the state to ensure that agencies reach appropriate and informed decisions about their vendors. In addition to the operational teams that we have listed here, we also have a section within the Bureau whose functions include maintaining Chapter 11 of the Guide to Financial Operations to ensure we're providing the most up-to-date information. And we also assist vendors in obtaining New York State vendor IDs if they don't have an agency sponsor. Next slide, please. As Trish mentioned at the beginning, here's some contact information for the Bureau. I did want to thank you for the opportunity to provide you with this introduction to the Bureau of Contracts. Again, this listing will give you some good contact information if you ever need to reach us. There's numbers listed for general information. If you have a question on contract status, there's a number for that, and a couple of numbers just for some of our various systems that you may need help with along the way. With that, I just want to thank you again, and I'm going to turn it over to Holly Riley in the Bureau of State Expenditures. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Holly Riley, the Director of State Expenditures, and I'm pleased to be here today to tell you about some of the great things that our Bureau does. Next slide, please. It's time to make a payment. As you could probably tell from the Bureau name, all kinds of payments are processed in state expenditures, not just contract payments, but all payments made through the statewide financial system or on state credit cards. We also audit certain claims and payments made by the State Insurance Fund, the Department of Labor, and the Workers' Compensation Board, as well as certain refunds and credits from the Department of Taxation and Finance. Next slide, please. Our mission is twofold. On one hand, we are processing payments in SFS, and we are always looking for ways to improve the process. On the other hand, we are auditing payments to prevent fraud, waste, and improper disbursements from state funds. Next slide, please. We take our responsibility very seriously. We are an important line of defense to protect taxpayer money and ensure funds are spent appropriately. Next slide, please. Our goal is to ensure all transactions are processed efficiently and timely. More than that, we want to ensure payments and refunds are appropriate to pay by identifying and preventing fraudulent, wasteful, or improper expenditures. We commit to a 2-day time limit for making an audit decision on transactions processed and audited in SFS. Next slide, please. It's not just about making payments, though. We also strive to improve agency operations by providing customer service to agencies, vendors, and other constituents, and providing training to agencies and vendors. Next slide, please. Finally, we always strive to improve our ways of doing business by re-engineering procedures and using technology to help us with auditing and processing. A big push for us lately has been partnering with vendors, constituents, and agencies to transition to an electronic payment process from start to finish, which includes the purchase order, the invoice, and the payment. Next slide, please. So here are our focus areas. We talked about the payment audit earlier, We use a risk-based approach to audit about 20,000 transactions each day. This includes SFS payments, UI benefit payments, and tax refunds, among others. For payment processing, we process payments through the statewide financial system and ensure return checks are processed appropriately. Our vendor management unit validates and maintains vendor information for vendors registered in the statewide vendor file and prepares 1099 federal reporting documents. Liens and offsets, we process payment assignments, payment intercepts, and various forms of liens, levies, and offsets. In terms of policy and guidance, we develop payment processing guidance, internal control certification guidance, and travel policies for state agency in OSC's Guide to Financial Operations and the New York State Travel Manual. We also provide related training to state agencies. And finally, customer service. We provide customer service support, including for vendor, payment, and certain purchasing matters. We respond to FOIL requests and other requests for information. And we also populate the Open Book New York website with SFS payment information. Next slide, please. This is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you ever need help in any of these areas. We have a general helpline, phone number, and email, where someone will make sure that you get in touch with the correct person to assist you. Or you can also email specific addresses for assistance with vendor updates, 1099 reporting, electronic payments, liens and offsets, and the vendor file. And that's enough about expenditures. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Melissa Clayton from the Bureau of Accounting Operations to talk about the other side of the equation, revenue and cash management. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Melissa Clayton. I'm the Assistant Director of the Bureau of State Accounting Operations. I see a lot of familiar names in the room today, so some of this may be a refresher for you that work with us every day, but hopefully we can give you something new to take away about what we do here in operations. Next slide, please. So Melody spoke earlier in the presentation about BSAO's budgets and spending section and our responsibilities in that area. And some could say that that's kind of the starting point of a financial transaction making its way through the state. And then to build on that, Brian and Holly talked about the contracting roles and reviewing and auditing vouchers submitted by the agencies. And then I want to talk a little bit more, building on what Melody said about BSAO's other roles related to really how to ensure those payments go out on time and correctly. So our major functions, which are listed on the slide, and I'm going to get into more detail, are really performed by our other three areas of BSAO, which are our revenue, refund, and financial plan implementation team, our federal billing and projects unit, and our cash management unit. Next slide, please. So one of the key roles of BSAO is really to ensure that state revenues are recorded accurately and timely, because we want to make sure that we have cash in the bank to support those voucher payments that are in process and need to be made to constituents, taxpayers, grantees, etc. We work hand in hand with the Department of Tax and Finance, their Treasury Division, to reconcile every day each dollar that comes into the general checking account, to make sure that all tax monies, miscellaneous receipts, grants received by the federal government are recorded to the correct funds. We also work closely with the Division of Budget to support any budgetary or permanent legislation that is needed to implement their financial plan, the state's financial plan, which that may be executing operating transfers between funds to ensure that funding aligns with payments that are being made, or maybe establishing new funds for new programs, that sort of thing. On the federal side, we have a pretty strong guidance role with regard to federal grants. We administer approximately 95% of federal grants on behalf of state agencies, which includes the daily drawdown to reimburse states, federal supported funding. Let's see. We also have a significant responsibility as joint custodian of the state's general checking account with the tax and finance, as well as the sole custodian of the comptroller's refund account. And with that role, we, on a daily basis, release and authorize payments to our various banking partners in order to make sure that those checks and electronic payments are able to be released and get in the hands of the people who need them. Next slide, please. Okay, and last but not least, BSAO performs cash management and other banking functions. So on behalf of the state's general checking account, as well as the various state administered bank accounts, which I'm sure some of you are actively involved in. We monitor cash inflows, cash outflows on a daily basis to make sure that we have enough money in the bank to make our payments. We also use those cash projections to provide an amount available for OSC's investment folks to go out to the market and purchase the type of risk-averse investments that New York State is able to invest in according to state law. And with that, with OSC's statutory role as being approvers of all state administered bank accounts, of which we have over 1,500 conservatively, we work with agencies and banking partners across the state to get the services that agencies need and to try to keep those as cost effective as possible. So you may have worked with us on RFPs or banking agreements and that kind of thing if you find yourself with a state administered bank account. Next slide, please. So lastly, here's our contact info. We use a number of shared mailboxes in the Bureau for our various functions. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions on any of the various areas that we cover within the Bureau. We're always happy to help. And I think that's it for BSAO. And with that, I would like to introduce Brian Moulton of the Bureau of State Payroll Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, everyone. I am Brian Moulton, the Director of the Bureau of State Payroll Services, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an introduction to our Bureau this morning. Next slide, please. The Bureau of State Payroll Services is responsible for ensuring that New York State employees are paid timely and accurately in accordance with appropriate state and federal laws, rules, regulations, and collective bargaining agreements. Next slide, please. Payroll Services is made up of approximately 100 employees in the Payroll Specialist, Payroll Analyst, and Business Systems Analyst title series. The Bureau is divided into 4 teams specializing in various payroll disciplines that conduct the work of the Bureau. These teams provide a myriad of services for state employees, state agency users, deduction agents, unions, elected officials, and other government agencies. These teams are our earnings team, our earnings team, payroll deductions and tax administration, the system support group, and our payroll administration team. Next slide, please. Our payroll earnings team has a wide variety of responsibilities which focus on ensuring that approximately 250,000 state employees and more than 500 payroll agencies are paid accurately. The team performs its responsibilities for employees of the executive, judiciary, legislature, state university, and senior colleges of the City University of New York. Their weekly transaction review covers both the administrative and institution pay cycles for the executive and non-executive branch agencies. Earnings staff analyze weekly payroll transactions and information submitted by agencies in the earnings payroll system, PayServe. Beginning in April, the earnings team has paid retroactive salary increases to over 200,000 employees due to the 2020 deferments brought on by budget restrictions during the pandemic. They have also been very busy working with DOB, GOER, and Civil Service, creating new COVID-related earnings and leave codes since the pandemic began. Next slide, please. Our payroll deductions and tax administration team audits and processes the deductions for taxes for over 30 taxing authorities, child support garnishments, union dues, charitable and pension contributions, health insurance, and all other deductions. The team processes the deductions for 7 different retirement systems, 46 unions, 110 negotiating units, dozens of financial institutions, including credit unions and insurance companies, and the State Employees Federated Appeal. This section is responsible for timely and accurate payment and reporting of employee and employer tax withholdings, including the issuance of over 350,000 W-2s, 1042s, 1099s, and W-2C statements annually. Next slide, please. The System Support Group is responsible for maintaining and enhancing the New York State payroll system known as PayServe. SSG performs a variety of analysis to implement system changes, maintenance patches, and new functionality to PayServe. They ensure that the payroll system properly calculates all employee payments. They are responsible for understanding the needs of our business units and translating them into functional requirements to be used by OSC-CIO teams to ensure that the payroll system is modified and updated appropriately. SSG is also responsible for troubleshooting problems and issues that may arise in the system. This section also ensures payroll changes are properly transmitted to the state's financial system and oversees the processing of data files and interfaces with numerous external business partners. There are currently over 2,200 users of the payroll system. In March, the team successfully implemented an extremely large PeopleSoft upgrade, which eliminated costly customizations and introduced new technology and efficiencies. The SSG team is also responsible for all aspects of New York State Payroll Online, or NYSPO. NYSPO is a statewide employee self-service application that gives employees access to electronic check stubs and W-2s. Employees also have the ability to opt out of receiving paper copies of direct deposit advices and W-2s, saving the state money and natural resources. In April, NYSPO access was rolled out to all agencies paid through PayServe. Slide, please. Our payroll administration team provides support for the Bureau and for our agency partners in many ways. The team issues over 100 payroll bulletins and PayServe bulletin board messages a year. They conduct scheduled review, research, and updates to the payroll manual and keep the Payroll Services web content up to date. They also prepare and maintain online payroll training for agency payroll officers and will resume in-person agency beginner PayServe training once it is safe to do so. Prior to the pandemic, they also organized the monthly payroll users group meetings with agency payroll officers, but during the pandemic have moved to creating and publishing monthly electronic newsletters, providing agencies with useful information from issued payroll bulletins to changes in our business processes. Among their many tasks, the team processes employment verifications, manages the payroll directory and executive correspondence, and provides requested payroll information to state employees. Next slide, please. I'd like to share with you some interesting payroll statistics and Payroll Services. We issue over 6 million paychecks and direct deposits per year, totaling more than $17 billion. We withhold $3.2 billion in taxes annually. We make $4.8 billion in annual vendor payments. We collect and distribute $49 million in garnishments annually. And in 2020, we distributed 329,000 W-2 forms. Next slide, please. I want to thank you all for your time this morning. And if you have any questions for us in Payroll Services, please reach out at the phone number and email addresses provided. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn it over to Lauren Shantz, the Director of the Office of Unclaimed Funds.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Lauren Shantz. I'm the Director of the Office of Unclaimed Funds. And I'd like to share some exciting issues with you in the Office of Unclaimed Funds. First, an overview. Next slide, please. The Office of Unclaimed Funds ensures compliance with the New York State Abandoned Property Law, which was enacted in 1944. This office acts as custodian of abandoned property, seeks the rightful owners to refund the property, and transfers any surplus funds to the State General Fund. Now, we have over 150 employees in over 3 office locations throughout the state. Next slide, please. What are our goals? We have 3 main goals. We process claims and reports timely and accurately. We ensure compliance with the New York State Abandoned Property Law, and we provide the public with access to the abandoned property information. Now, this is done through our website, and we have a call center as well with an 800 number. Next slide, please. What are our key focus areas? The first focus area is the Audit Services Unit. We're located in New York City. We have approximately 35 auditors. We have been a leader in this field for many years, and most of the other states look to us for guidance in terms of audit services. We conduct audits of entities to identify abandoned money or securities that should be transferred to the New York State Controller's Office of Unclaimed Funds. This office, as I mentioned, is located in New York City. It is a financial hub, New York City. There are many corporations, insurance companies, and banks, and historically, that office has been located there. Second is the Compliance Services. Supports holders of unclaimed funds in reporting and transferring any due funds to the Office of Unclaimed Funds. The three largest would be banks, which report to us in this coming November. Insurance companies report to us in September, and corporations report to us in March. Those would be the three largest reporting industries. Claimant Services is the third key focus area. Communicates with customers to assist in finding and recovery of abandoned property. Processes customer claims for payment. We process over 1.5 million a day. We have a call center, and we have a outreach group as well that goes out throughout the state for outreach events. The fourth key focus area is systems modernizations and support. Supports reporting entities and customers through technology development and enhanced communication tools. We have a very robust website, which you can go to, and within 6 easy steps, if you are eligible, you can process a claim right online, get paid within 10 days. We have FAQs, we have a chat bot, and so forth. And next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to introduce the Assistant Director for the Office of Unclaimed Funds, Kelly Curacina, who will take you through the second half of this presentation. Kelly?
Thanks, Lawrence. So Unclaimed Funds is a great place to work. We find money for people and return their lost money. In some cases, they never knew that they lost it. In many cases, they did know. As Lawrence mentioned, the abandoned property law was enacted in the early 1940s. So for the last 77 years, Unclaimed Funds has been collecting and returning money to the rightful owners. Every year we reconcile the money that comes in and what we are able to return, and we calculate what we call our contingent liability. It's now over $17 billion. So if everyone who was entitled to claim their unclaimed funds came forward, the general fund would write a big check for $17 billion. We know that the people who are entitled to claim that money, there's over 44 million people, companies, organizations who are entitled to claim it. Every day we do return, as Lawrence mentioned, about $1.5 million a day. On a good week, we're processing over 10,000 claims. Those are checks and electronic payments going out to individuals, companies, nonprofits, and local governments. Next slide, please. Last year, despite all the challenges that we faced in 2020 and this year, 2021, we still had a very productive year. In a lot of ways, it was typical. The numbers, we were able to still collect the same amount of revenue that we've seen historically, which is close to $1 billion a year. So last year, $988 million was collected from the banks and insurance companies, and we were able to return over $400 million to the rightful owners. So that was over 570,000 claims were processed last year. And what's left over does go to the general fund. So that $17 billion that I mentioned, it's not sitting in an account. It is being used every day. It's being used by the state to help with offset operating expenses and so forth. Okay, next slide, please. The controller loves to return unclaimed funds. It's one of his favorite parts of the job. He always tells us that where we can find people and give these big check presentations, it's always a lot of fun. So if you haven't had the chance to check out our website, please do. It's search for yourself, search for your friends and family. There's an opportunity if you do find money for friends and family that you can share a link with them so that they can go directly to our website and claim it. Okay, next slide. Lawrence mentioned the website is really a very robust website. There's lots of information there, but we've made it as user-friendly as possible, and self-service is really the name of the game. Most of the claims that we receive, over 85, almost 90% of the claims that we receive are submitted through the website. So check it out. Like I said, if you find money for yourself, maybe even a deceased relative, the chances are that you're going to be able to at least start your claim online. We might need some additional documentation, but that's a good place to at least get it started. Over 10 million searches on the website every year, and that number just keeps going up. There is no fee. Sometimes you may hear about firms called finders or asset locators. There's businesses out there who make it their job to locate these people and help them to get their money back. The most that they can charge is 15%. But if you come directly to the Office of Unclaimed Funds, never a fee. People often ask if we pay interest, and if the account was interest bearing to begin with, like a bank account, or if there was like a security rent deposit that was being held in a bank account, we will pay interest on that. We pay interest for 5 years, and the current rate is 1%, which is a pretty good rate of return. Okay, next slide, please. People often ask, what was the largest amount that we've ever paid? We have, from time to time, paid large amounts to businesses and corporations, but the largest amount that we paid to an individual, a New York State resident, received over $5 million, $5.2 million from stocks that he had. There was, I believe, lots of different varieties of stocks involved, but we calculated what the current value was and returned to him over $5.2 million. We have one account that we are actively working to identify heirs to an estate. They're entitled to over $8 million. But these large amounts are not the norm. As you can imagine, most unclaimed funds are forgotten about by their owners because they're small. In reality, over 70% of the unclaimed funds that we collect are under $100. Okay, next slide. So Lawrence mentioned where the money comes from, and banks, as you can see here, is the majority of where the money does come from. But all businesses that do business in the state of New York or do business with New Yorkers have to report abandoned property. So that's from the Fortune 500 companies to the mom and pop shops. Everyone does have to reconcile their books and records, as you've heard all of us talk about today. And if they find money that has been unclaimed or has been no activity on the accounts for at least a year, they have to turn that money over. You'll see here the chart shows the different types of entities. One that's of particular interest to this group is uncashed state checks. So just like an unclaimed bank account, if there is a check that goes uncashed that's issued by a state agency, that does have to get turned over to us. That's becoming the bulk of what you see here in the other 14%. Uncashed state checks is becoming a category amongst its own. So we have a presentation later in the fall conference that talks specifically about how state agencies need to report and really try to find the owners before they have to report unclaimed funds. Okay. Here's how you can reach us. We do have a communication center toll-free number. Always want people to check out our website, check it frequently. Unclaimed funds comes in all the time. So if you have unclaimed funds or if you know somebody who does, we hope that you'll reach out to us and get your money back. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Debbie Hilson. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Hilson, and I'm the Director of the Bureau of Financial Reporting and Oil Spill Remediation. We've just spent the last 40 minutes or so walking you through the flow of activity within the Office of Operations, from the establishment of appropriations following enactment of the state's annual budget, contract approvals, voucher payments, the posting of receipts, the payroll process, and New York State's unclaimed funds. Next, I'll spend a few minutes speaking about how all of this activity comes together through reporting. Next slide, please. The Bureau of Financial Reporting and Oil Spill Remediation has two primary missions. First is the preparation and publication of the state's financial statements on both a cash and GAAP basis. The second is administering New York State's oil spill program. I'll start by speaking about the financial reporting side of the Bureau. Next slide, please. Our primary reporting goals are to issue financial statements that are accurate, timely, and in compliance with standards and policies. State finance law requires us to issue both annual cash and GAAP-based financial statements within 120 days of the end of the fiscal year. And while this is not always easy, we meet the deadline time and time again. The accuracy of our reports all starts with you, the agencies. The use of proper coding on all of your transactions in SFS is key, and that is something we all at OSC rely on from you. Like my other colleagues, we strive to provide you with policies and guidance to assist you with being able to provide the information needed for each transaction type. In addition, we also are responsible for the implementation of changes to financial reporting standards. This is primarily driven by changes issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, related to the GAAP-based reports, but sometimes also at the state level. Next slide, please. Within the Bureau, we have two reporting teams. One team focuses on preparing the cash basis reports, and the other handles the GAAP-based ones. There's a lot of collaboration that takes place between the teams. Our cash team prepares and issues a monthly report, which is required in state finance law to be issued on the 15th of each succeeding month, as well as the annual report, which is due by July 29th, again, 120 days after the end of the fiscal year. In order for the team to rely on the data for their reporting, they perform various reconciliations on SFS and bank accounts. They also manage the annual sole custody reporting and the compilation of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, better known as CFA, used in the state's federal single audit. They certainly keep busy with all of these tasks. Next slide, please. Our GAAP team is responsible for preparing and issuing quarterly interim financial statements, 45 days after the end of the quarter, as well as the annual report, which is due by July 29th. Agencies play a big part in providing information needed to finalize these reports. Many of you receive our outreach emails related to our agency financial reporting package, or AFRP, asking for information on a number of topics. We appreciate your cooperation and timely responses. The team also produces the state's annual comprehensive report and the financial condition report, which are both submitted to GFOA for consideration in their Certificate of Achievement programs. New York has been very successful in receiving these honors. This team is also responsible for implementing new GASB standards that are issued and providing feedback on exposure drafts as they become available. In recent years, there have been many new standards to implement, and most have been quite complex. The biggest one that we are currently working on is GASB 87 on leases. It has changed the definition of what a lease is for financial reporting. We have reached out to all the agencies for your assistance, and we want to thank you. We know this is no easy feat, but together we will be successful in this implementation. Stay tuned on this one, as there is more for all of us to do. And similar to the cash team, the GAAP team performs reconciliations of SFS data and the payroll escrow funds. Next slide, please. And next, I'll spend a few minutes speaking about our oil spill team. This team is responsible for the administration of the New York Environmental Protection and Spill Fund and administering the oil spill program. This program is handled between the Office of the State Comptroller, the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Attorney General, and the Department of Health for petroleum spills that occur. While every case is different, generally what happens when a spill occurs is DEC is responsible for cleaning up the spill, and those costs are initially borne by the Environmental Protection and Spill Conservation Fund. With each spill, it is determined whether there is a responsible party. And if so, it is our responsibility to refer those cases to the Attorney General to begin the process to be reimbursed for our costs. At times, the spill is so severe that folks at the Department of Health work with the individuals impacted under the relocation program. Next slide, please. The primary goals of this team are to timely review and certify the vouchers for cleanup costs and damage claims, and to seek and account for reimbursement. The team also produces the fund's financial statements on a monthly and annual basis. Next slide, please. For your reference, we've included our contact information should you have any questions. Feel free to reach out at any time, and we'd be happy to help you on anything under our bureau. And at this time, we've concluded what we have prepared for you. We'd like to thank you all for spending some time with us this morning, and we hope you have learned a little bit more about what we do here at the State Comptroller's Office in the Office of Operations. We hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the conference. Thank you so much for your time.